Well, good afternoon, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on a very pleasant Monday afternoon. And I'm in my greenhouse doing some work, and also been doing some prepping in the garden. So I thought we'd take a little early wander around, and there is some activity going on, but you'll see some of the work that's taking place in the garden, and what a big difference it makes to have a little greenhouse. Okie dokie, so here we go. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep my back to the wind as we take a little tour around. I'm sure glad I got all of my wood stacked, and you can see already these radial cracks here are a sign that that wood is drying and seasoning. It'll be all nice and prepped up, ready to go for winter time, and that's what you need. As we say, you only burn wet wood once. And I managed to do a little bit of work for somebody and cut down a tree for them, so I actually got a little bit of extra wood. That's ash. Very nice. Anyway, like I say, you only burn wet wood once, and I'm glad to have this all in the shed, away from the weather, at the beginning of May. Okay, first little thing, let's go check what's cooking in the greenhouse. Well, here we go. The lettuce is coming up. These are romaine lettuce, and this is a red salad bowl. And you might wonder why I've left a little bit of space here. So there's a big gap in the center, but I'll tell you, when these start coming up, I will need all of that space to transplant them, because as you probably well know, with romaine they do get quite large. This has become my little work area until the tomatoes go in. This is going to be where my tomatoes are going to be. And I can't believe the strawberries. Look, the strawberries are flowering out. This is May the 4th. So we are well ahead of the game, and I've seen some flies in here, and I'm hoping that they're going to be landing on those flowers and pollinating for me. I mentioned before how you will need a fan if you have a greenhouse. The temperature already in here gets up quite high during the course of a sunny day, and I'm sure I'm going to have to get a one on a stand that oscillates, and so I can blow some of the heat. I'll take that top window out and blow some of the heat out that end. So I've got some squash going on here, some red Russian kale, some bok choy, some Swiss chard, and in this tray there is some leek, some huge black sunflowers, and some black turtle beans. And I saw this on Facebook. I don't know if you've seen this thing, you know, where they cut a pepper in half and they knock some of the seeds off and put some soil in there, water it, and presto, you have got peppers growing. So I'm going to give that a try. We'll see. I only just put those out there about 2 days ago. And the beets, you can just see they're just tiny, but they're starting to come up. Won't be long now. And I don't know if you knew, but you know those beet seeds that you have, they're actually two seeds. They're two plants, or two seeds stuck together. I didn't know that. So there you go. They'll all have to be dug up and transplanted. And that will neaten up the rows. And so I'm expecting to be eating beets in about 3 weeks' time. It's amazing how much speed up time it makes having the greenhouse. You know, germination, to get the plants to this stage, you're already 10 days ahead of the game. You know, I wouldn't be planting outside until May 24, and by that time, you know, we will be nearly 30 days into the process, and in a 70 to 90 day harvest, you know, you're a third to a half of the way there. Now, I just noticed the other day the leaves are just starting to burst out on the grapevine, The grapevine overwintered a lot better than it did last year. I had to cut all of this back. I don't know if you can see that stem cut off there, but that was it just died right out, and it sent out a new shoot last year, and I've trained those up, and we'll see how much of that buds out. But I'm wondering if the grapevines just needed a little bit of time that first year. You know, they didn't have a good established root network down there. And again, I don't know if you can see, just on the tip of one of those buds there, there's a red dot. That is it starting to bud out. Now this is a yellow grapevine, and the other one is a red grapevine. So I'm looking forward to get a few more things in, won't be long. So the lilacs are leafing out, and the daylilies seem to have taken pretty well. There's my wood nice and covered from the rain. That will be going into the new raised bed. This, by the way, is another pile of worm composted horse manure. Absolutely brilliant. You can see how well rotted down that is, and actually right at the very bottom you'll find any worms that were in this whole pile will head to the bottom, and they're great to add to the garden too. Got a full tank of water ready to go. And I see these are a kind of orange raspberry variety, and I see they've been busy underground sending out runners all over the place. So it looks like I'm going to have quite a crop of these orange raspberries. They're really tasty. And the cherry tree is starting to leaf out, so it's obviously survived its first winter in its new location. So we'll see how that goes. Now both these beds here, these two and these two, are all in potatoes this year. Last year I had onions in here, and on this side I had squash. So I like to rotate my crops every year, especially potatoes, the potato bugs, that kind of stuff. Now my squash this year is going to go into this bed, and you can see I've got two beds of onions here, and you can see them just starting to stick their little heads. Look at this, you see that onion? You know what that is? Skunks have been getting up in the garden looking for grubs, and they're not interested in the onions. They just knock them out of the way, but they are a bit of a pest. But once we get up and running, and once we get past spring, that will stop. So as you can see, all this new snow fence, I've been prepping up the property because I am intending to purchase a dog, and so I wanted to make my backyard dog proof. So there you go, it's completely fenced in now. This is my new pea trellis I built last year, and peas haven't started to come yet. The ones on the other side, they're a different variety. They're just starting to poke their heads through now. We'll see when we get to the other side. Now you might not be able to see here, this is carrots in here, and there are just some little tiny hairs just starting to come through the soil. Carrots are a long germinator. You have to keep them constantly moist for 10 days or they won't germinate. And I put that chicken wire around that pole. That was an old basketball pole that was here when I arrived, and so I thought I'd make use of that, and I'm going to grow cucumbers up that pole. Now here we have some garlic. And you can just see, look, there's one pea right there, just starting to poke its head through the soil. Won't be long now. But this year, because of the situation, I am putting things that keep very well. Peas, of course, are just, I love to eat the peas, but lots of potatoes. Here is another bed of potatoes. This was the first bed that I planted. These are my reds, and you can see they're just starting to poke their heads through the soil. Yeah, there's another one. One over there. The other thing that's made me do putting all this fence in is it's tidied up the edge of the property. Oh look, there's the rhubarb coming up. But I'm going to make this all wildflowers in this little bed here. But you know, I just kind of edged it in nicely, just keeps those lilacs in check. And I trimmed them off sort of hedge height last year. I'm going to maintain that so they don't shade my garden, but they do give a little privacy between myself and the neighbour, which is an Airbnb. Again, this bed here is just being prepped, as is this one, and we'll be planting in there very, very shortly. I believe I'm going to put another bed of potatoes in here, and then these 1, 2, 3 beds are going to be, haven't quite decided yet. Let me put some more squash in. But as I say, because of the farming situation that's going on this year, I don't know if you've been noticing or hearing about farmers that have had to put all of their food into the garbage or plough them in. The same with animals, because they can't get them to market, can't get the food or the animals to market. Feed's having problems being delivered because of food chain issues. And I'm sure that the trucks, there's a lot of independents have gone bankrupt over this because they can't get quite enough business to make the payments. And of course that's one of the kind of relief valves when you need to get stuff to market and you need those extra trucks. That's what those independents do. They fill that gap. Now this is my other big raspberry bed, and you can see I trimmed all of those down. They've all been fertilized, and they're starting to come on now. More daylilies and some bee balm in the corner there. I'd like this to be a corner of colour. Now this year I separated out all of these. These are Egyptian onions, and you don't actually eat the onion, you eat the stems. They're like a flavouring, a bit like a big chive, but they do have quite a unique flavour, and I love them in sandwiches. Now this is my herb bed. This is the sage that came back from last year, and nettle. I'll be eating the tops of those soon. That's nice, young, tasty nettle tops. Very healthy. Chives, I just transplanted those this year, so they got their own little spot to grow in. They're doing really well. Mint, of course, comes up every year, perennial. Very nice. This is regular spearmint. Now, I don't know if you can see in here, those little hairs coming up through. Just seeing little bits. That is dillweed. We like dill. They just seem to reseed themselves every year, these little beds. This here is pineapple mint. You can see there's a little sprig there coming through. But I just again fertilize these. I add manure to these beds every single year. This is cilantro, and we've had to do a few repairs. These corners tend to go. I've been very disappointed with the spruce, and the hemlock, I'm sure, will be a much stronger, much tougher kind of wood. And anyway, we're trying to muddle along as best we can, you know, with these raised beds and make them last. I don't have the energy to replace all of them all at the same time, so I'm trying to stagger the process. This here is oregano. I just cleaned up this bed the other day. This is more garlic in here. And I have to get a new Buddha for my temple. I always like to have a Buddha in the garden overlooking the things that are going on. These are more onions going in. And of course I'll be growing some beans up this trellis here. Now, as you can see, I started doing some work on this raised bed. This here, although you can't see any of it now, believe it or not, is an asparagus bed. And so I thought I would tidy that up, make it a little bit more neat. One of the things that you learn very, very quickly with raised beds, especially when you built them as I have here, you need adequate space between these raised beds to be able to get around. And unfortunately, you see that's a little too narrow, and I'm going to be widening it up to this kind of width so I can get maybe a small wheelbarrow down here or work cart. Anyway, the work is coming along, and I hope to get this bed installed before the asparagus comes up. I'm not going to take it up 3 boards, I'm just going to take it up 2 boards, because you have to remember this is dug down. This doesn't just stop at the surface here. This actually goes down about another foot below that, and that's where the asparagus is. And so 2 boards will give me a good about 2.5–3 feet of soil, and I think that is more than enough for my asparagus. Anyway, I'm certainly pleased with the way things are going. These new beds are looking really good. They've overwintered very, very nicely. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this quick trip around my garden, and I know I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but, and this is a big but, there are food issues coming down the track. This outbreak has caused so many disruptions in the food chain process. For example, you know, migrant workers aren't being led across the border to go work on the farms in California, Texas and Florida, and so no spring planting has gotten done. The same up in Canada. We have a lot of migrant workers coming to this country because, quite honestly, Canadians don't want to pick and plant food. And so we import these workers, and they have a season. They come across Canada from spring to fall, backwards and forwards, helping out whatever is needed at that particular time, whether it be planting, tending or picking. And so this has really hampered a lot of planting that should have been taking place. We've had a cool spring. Here in southern Ontario it's actually been fairly dry. For April we've had hardly any rain at all, and it wasn't a particularly wet winter either. It was mostly ice, and although we did have a few little minor flooding issues, certainly we didn't have anywhere near the runoff that you would be hoping for to get the ground good and waterlogged for spring growth. So it's definitely a good idea, and I'm hoping that this 2-month shutdown has really got people thinking, being a little bit more introspective about things, and looking forward. I think this shockwave has been a big eye-opener for many people. You know, this is one of the reasons, it's not just a love of doing what I'm doing. One of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is because I've known for a long time that these supply chains in every area of globalism were just an absolute folly. And as we can see, in 2 short months our entire supply chain has collapsed. You've got tankers now storing oil because there's such a backlog of oil. There's no shipping, carrying goods across the world backwards and forwards, and you could have a plant or a factory in North America here, say for example you're making work boots, and but the eyelets, the little eyes that the laces go through, are made in China. Well, you can't finish that product until you get those eyelets. And you see how much of a crazy idea this has been, to outsource just about all of our manufacturing, and the manufacturing that we do have remaining is heavily dependent on imports from China. So if the red flags aren't going off in people's heads right now, I don't know when they will ever go off. We need to be more self-sufficient, we need to be more resilient, we need to know how to get along and cooperate with each other. We're going to have to put together some sort of farming cooperative so that we can share food, and that when I have a glut of potatoes or peas or beans or what have you, that I can trade out for things that I don't have. I think there are a lot of good things that can come out of this, and I'm very, very positive actually that this 2-month lockdown has been a really good look at the systems that we have and the mistakes that we've made, and maybe this is actually a good thing in the long run, that we have recognized this and we can start to rectify some of these things and start being more independent of the government, of healthcare facilities, because we can see that they get overloaded in a real hurry. So tending to ourselves much more, cooking for ourselves, living off our own produce. These are all good things to have happen in your life and in your community, because when you are a little bit more self-sufficient, the biggest bonus that you're giving back to your community is that you are not going to be a drag on resources should a situation like this occur in the future. And so just not being, you don't necessarily have to help, just not being a drag on resources by being able to look after yourself. But I'm pretty certain that if you can look after yourself, you are going to be able to help in an incredibly good way. So this is a learning experience. This is one of the things I do. This is one of the little mind games that I play when adversity strikes. I just treat it as a learning experience. And so all of the things I'm seeing, the weaknesses that I've seen come out, I am taking note of, and I'm preparing to fill some of those gaps in my own personal life so that I am not hit by some of those shortages, some of those issues. And I would urge you all, again, I may sound like a broken record, but I would urge all of you to start thinking along the same lines and being a little bit more resilient. Anyway, I know there have been some tragedies in families around the world because of this outbreak, but thankfully it looks like we are on the downside now. Here in Ontario, some of the restrictions have been lifted, and some construction has gone back to work. Marinas and golf courses have been told that they can prepare. They will probably be part of the second wave, along with restaurants and so on and so forth. So that's something to look forward to, that we may get some kind of a summer season up here in Bobcaygeon. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have, please comment, like and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant afternoon, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.